Alrighty, good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dame Diala Cohen, a former Kingdom Throne Weapons Marshal for Kingdom of Atlantia. And today's class is about building Plumbatas and Slings, the two newest additions to the basic Throne Weapons stable. Caveat at the beginning, the Slings are not yet approved for full use in Atlantia. But if we can get some people out there playing with them and giving back some statistics to the New Kingdom Marshal, then we can figure out our necessary safety concerns and go from there. Plumbatas are real easy. That's why to build. That's why I combined the two classes. It takes about 30 seconds to build one. So we'll start with them. This is going to be designed for your basic Plumbata. Is made from an arrow shaft and has a weight and tip on the end. These are, if you've got a friend who's an archer, hey, this is the way to go. You need to use at least an 11/32 shaft or a 23/64, because the 5/16 will go right through the nut. Then you have this nice little connector nut threaded all the way through. You want to buy the 2-inch ones if you can find them. They add the extra weight. The smaller ones have more problems with the wind due to their light weight. And then you've got your tip, which will look like this. They're sold as threaded studs. They're used to hang things in ceilings. I don't know if this is showing up backwards for you or not. It shows up backwards for me, but it's just a threaded stud, 1 1/4 inch with a 3/8 inch thread diameter. And the 3/8 is also for the coupler. So what you need is a shaft, a coupler, a tip, and some sort of glue. I use either Loctite or Thread Locker. These are nice because they help to prevent the typical target hitting vibrations from loosening your tips off, but they also can be replaced. If you want to use real glue between the tip and the coupler, that works fine too, because those you're not as worried about replacing. But once that's a piece, it's a piece. So
Do you have a materials list written up for this?
I do not have it posted yet anywhere. I will hopefully get it out to the Atlantean Throne Weapons page. After this class, I've just finished putting it all together for both classes together.
Thank you.
So find a friend who's got a nice shaft that they broke the tip off of and can no longer use because it's too short for them. Actually, the one I just picked up happens to be a 5/16, which doesn't work real well. Basically, you want to do a dry fit first, just sticking it in, screw it in, trying to keep it as straight as possible. Sometimes that doesn't work real well, and you will get a little bit of a bend. Right now, people are not as concerned about the accuracy on these, so until you can get yourself to that point, you dry fit it in, take it out, put some glue around the threads, screw it back in, and you're done with that. The other half, just put some glue on the threads and screw it in place, which of course does not want to work right now. There we go. The other advantage to using the slightly larger coupling nuts is that the small ones take up most of the space in the coupler. Together, you have a nice plumbata ready for use. But as a little side, some quick options that you can use. Instead of the arrow shaft, if you need to, you can go and buy 3/8 inch dowel. And that you will have to file down a little bit at the end in order to get it to screw into the 3/8 inch coupler. And a friend of mine took some carriage bolts and cut the heads off, ground that end to a point, and the 3/8 inch goes right into the coupler, just the same as the thing. Mungo, you have a question?
Yes, Diallo, what's the optimum length, do you think, of the shaft itself, of the arrow part?
There are two schools of on that. One is that they needed to fit behind the shields, so they wanted them on the shorter side, 18 to 20 inches overall. Others have them going into quivers like arrows, so you can have them longer at that point.
Hmm.
Generally, since there are basically 3 ways to throw it, the least effective is like a dart, but then you can throw them overhand like an axe, or throw them underhand and loft them. If you're the type who prefers the underhand loft, just make sure that the length is such that you're not scraping the ground or having to lift your shoulder up like this in order to get a swing. That's really the only guidance that I can do on that. Yes, Sarah.
Can you use the addle to throw?
No, these are separate. The atlatl falls under archery, and those darts are different.
Yeah, I know that. It's
yeah.
just I was wondering if I could use the thrower to throw that.
No, because these are not designed for that, and that would not put them on the thrown weapons range.
Okay.
That would move them over to the archery range, and
Oh, yeah,
generally
so
they don't have the
the
divot on
dimple.
the end
Yeah,
to
the
use
divot.
for the atlatl.
Yeah, but okay, thank you.
Where using the arrow, you're generally going to have to grab it by the fletches or by what little areas behind the fletches. If you choose to use the dowel method, you do need to use heavier, longer fletches, thicker fletches, because the heavier heads need that in order to stabilize, but you can adjust it to allow more room for your hand. See that Anya has said that 18 inches total length seems to work for her and for most people. I started with longer ones. There are people who manufacture and sell, and you can find these nice weights like this. There's also a YouTube video out there of somebody who used lead and has all the precautions for using lead to make basically about a 2-inch cylinder and put the pieces into that. So if you like the heavier weights, that would be the way to go. Lighter weights, the couplers work just great, and they pierce hard targets and soft targets. Any other questions on the plumbatas? Because that's basically all there is to building a plumbata. It's screw the things together and glue them down.
I was thinking that I've got something like 250 crossbow bolts sitting around that aren't getting used, but that's going to be a little short because they're 14 or 16 inches.
Well, when you add the tip on, it's going to be
okay.
It'll take that up a little bit. The only thing is that I've never tried a 2-fletched plumbata, and since most of my crossbow bolts are 2-fletched, I don't know whether that would have much of an effect on how well it'll stabilize. You can experiment and try. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, the only difference I do with your gluing the shaft on,
yes,
I use plumber's tape.
okay,
To tighten the fit in.
Yeah.
Hasn't failed yet.
Anya, we'll discuss target types if there's time at the end. but yeah, well, and you can do it into the hard targets and soft targets, vertical or round targets, either one. But I do have a few fun things with that if we get to it. Slings. Okay, very few kingdoms have fully approved slings at last check. Though they're approved at the society level, they are still experimental in the other kingdoms. I started researching the making of slings. I found a couple of YouTube videos on making them, on how to use them. There is a lovely lady up in Ethelmark/Middle. She hails from both, who has put together some videos, and I based a lot of this class on what I learned from her. That's Baroness Anastasie de la Moore. Some other good people to check out on the web are Todd's Workshop. He's great for anything archery, thrown weapons. He's got some beautiful videos. His one on slings does have some really ugly ones that wouldn't be allowed in the SCA, but he also has some good ones. The main thing for an SCA legal sling is that it has to be all natural materials. So that cuts out things like paracord and such. But the first one I made, what I'm going to be teaching is your basic fully braided sling. This is my mini one. You have a loop for your finger to go in, a little pocket to hold the ammunition, and a knot on the end where you would take it, put your little rock in there, and sling. This is all done purely by braiding. There's nothing else needed. There are some people who do prefer having a more solid cup on them, and I will discuss this briefly later on in the discussion. So my first one was really ugly. I didn't have any twine in the house or anything. I took a roll of sisal and I split each of the sisal strands into its thirds in order to make this, braided it up. It's clunky, it's actually usable, it's ugly, it goes away. The ones that I prefer are just, and again, it's jute or sisal workout or manila. That gives you the natural fiber. Got some 7-pound jute here, and also some basically kind of crafting. He said, I don't know if you're seeing that as are you guys seeing that reading properly? I see it inverted. Okay.
It's
So,
reading properly.
okay, thank you. So just some jute twine. I recommend less than a 1/4 inch in diameter. So you're gonna cut a bunch of lengths of the twine. You want it to be something that is braidable, so divisible by 3. If you have 3 strands, you're going to end up with 6, which is still divisible by 3. If you want to go with something slightly thicker, go with 6 strands, which folded over becomes divisible, which is 12, also divisible by 3, so you can still nicely braid. I've seen recommendations for anything from 5 to 8 yards to start with. I'm not going to say what's the best length because your throwing style will change, your preferences will change. This will take some experimentation on your part to find one that is a length that you like. One of the previously mentioned, Tyler Danger, does a nice video on YouTube on this, and he recommends from fingertip to elbow. Those always seemed a little bit short for me. I like mine maybe about another 4 inches longer than that. So how do you get from this to this? Place to start is where your finger is going to go. So you're going to need your twine. Here's my other, I'll flip my thing over for some sort of a clip. Paper clips will work, but I generally prefer the binder clips or the spring-loaded clothespins work nicely too. You want something that's going to hold it tight. You can do it without either and just pinch it with your fingers. If you don't have anything around and you just want to make one while you're sitting in court, it works just fine. So you find your center, take your twine, fold it in half, find your center point. Go back about 2 inches from that center point, and that's where you're going to start your braid. What you're going to try to do, depending on what finger you like to loop it over, you're going to want to get your braid to fit over your finger. So you just pick it up, start braiding. Is there anybody who doesn't know how to braid? It's basically, you've got 3 strands and you just fold one over, fold the outside over, fold outside over, fold the outside over, fold the outside over. You just keep doing that. With this one, not so much of a problem. When you start with something longer, you will constantly need to untangle your strings. And when you get this to a point, let me move this quickly here, because whatever, since okay, so it is focusing on me, but what I'm getting on my screen is mostly Lissa's thing because she's recording this. So you just keep braiding it along, checking every now and then if it'll fit your finger. When you get it to the length you need, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. I think this one may be a little bit short for me right now, but you've got your length. Now you want to bring it together. You've got 3 strands on this side, in this case, because I used only 6 strands or 6 thing, and 3 on this. Take 2, 2, and 2, and again, just start braiding it, snug it up to itself. And you now have your finger loop, and you're on your way down the rest of the sling. Are there any questions at this point? It's, like I said, it's really kind of easy. It just can be time consuming, mostly with the detangling. Because yesterday when I was prepping one, I made a real knotted mess out of it. So, got one, got a little bit longer, and get to the point. The length, I generally count how many times I braid. With the thinner twines, that's going to be a lot more than with the thicker twines. This is with the thin crafting twine. This was that 7-pound twine. This was 3 strands, this one was 6. So you can see the difference in the thickness. Both will work. Think that the 6 works out a little bit better, gives you a little bit more to work with, but it does get more into the tangle department. So once you've reached the length that you want, where did my sling go? Where's my little miss? Where'd my mini sling go? Ah, here it is. Once you've reached the point, the length that you want for your sling, you're going to need to split it to make your cup. So to split it, again, use a nice clip, divide your threads in half. If you started with 3, you've got 6, so it's 3 on each side. If you started with 6, you've got 12, so it's 6 on each side. Pull that half off to the side, ignore it. With the remaining strands, you are going to make them into 3, and then again, you're going to just braid like you did at the top. Keep that out of the way. Yeah, I can't do it that way. There. And you've got it to the length that you want for your cup. You'll stop that, bring the clip down, clip it to hold it, go back to your other half, get it into your 3s, and just braid one end over the other. Okay, to get into all of this fun with disentangling. Let's see, how close am I getting there? Again, you can measure or count the number of braids that you do. 1, 2, 3, 4. You do want them to be as close to the same length as possible. See that I still need about another 2 or 3 here. Once I remove the clip. I've got my 2 halves of my pocket, and I now have 12 strands. So take 2 from one side, 2 from the other to make your middle set. Combine the other 4. In this case, since I'm using the 6th strand, and start braiding again until you get to the other end. Anya, you have a question?
I do. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Brian's listening to, sorry, Knutter's listening to another class, so I wasn't sure. So you need to start with something divisible by 3 and then you double it. Have you done any exploration with a 3rd strand, like a middle strand in their cup? Does that add anything? I'm thinking like I use hacky sack ammo and I'm worried 2 might not be enough.
I've used 2 with hacky sacks and other things, but you just need to make sure that the cup is small enough so that your hacky sack won't go through, or just make sure that you catch it on the cup and don't let it slide through. The larger you make your cup, the larger ammo you can use. But if you prefer to just match it up to your to your hacky sacks. I once considered trying to see if a third one would work. I haven't completed one that way. It might be something interesting for you to play with.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
I'm a fiber
I
artist.
mean,
I
because
can do that.
this had 12 strands there in the middle. It comes down to, I mean, you can have 3 groups of 4 where,
Yeah, you'd have to do divisible by 9.
right, but, or you can just double up, you know, do it 2 1 and 1 in each set to make your 3s. So it won't be perfectly balanced, but it works out the same way. I don't see why it wouldn't work. Like I said, I considered that because, yeah, just a single hole there, smaller ammo can go through. So once you finish your braiding, you've got them braided together. You just keep braiding until put that cup at the center. When you get down to the same length as your, down to where your finger loop is, you can just take your ends and knot it off or tie in a button or something like that. This one I didn't quite get my 2 lengths. I didn't count as I did it. So as you can see, I now have a little smiley face. It's not a perfectly balanced cup. But there you have the basics of the sling. As I said, when it comes to actually filling in the cup, there are multiple ways of doing that. You can take a piece of leather, form it into that cup, and just sew it on. I've seen people who have done that. I've never done it, so I don't have an extant example of that for you. Some people just like to put either leather or something else on the cup and inside the finger loop to give a stronger grip, as it were, keep things from sliding, either a piece of suede or something onto there. But yeah, so, or you can make your own cup. The cup will actually, doesn't have to be cupped per se, it can just be a round circle, because generally you're just going to put something in there, and as the leather wears, it will start to form a bit of a cup. Some people put like a little slit in there to manually push it into becoming a cup. To do one of this style, you would start the same way with your finger loop. So you've got your finger loop, you're coming down, you're braiding as you go. Disentangle this one. What I actually did with this was I chose a point. I didn't actually choose the halfway point. I chose a point nearer to the end, braided it, then braided it back into itself until I ran out, giving me just one set here. So I can get the strays out of there. 1, 2, 1, 2, and 2. Okay. So you would braid this down to just that half length that you want. Disentangling as you go. Believe me, you want to disentangle early and often, or you get a nice little mess. When you get to the length that you want, and you have yourself a nice little loop, what I tend to do is just There's this one, I didn't enlarge this loop yet. Just feed it through. And of course, I miss a couple of strands. We want to feed the whole thing through, not just half of it. Come on, you. There we go. So you're basically looped through like this. Give yourself a little bit of extra space. Turn it around. And what am I going to do? Braid it back on itself, which is sometimes a little bit tougher. What I've done is, because this one can no longer separate, I use that as one of the strands, divide the other in half, and just braid it across. Doing this backwards is really interesting. Until you get to the end of your braid. And you can knot it, you can burn it, whatever. And you now have it attached to your cup. And you have a sling that way. And you just make, basically you're making 2 braids instead of 1 long one. This one you need a little bit of extra material, handy at the time, but a lot of people prefer to have that cup for the security of not having something fall through. Are there any questions to this point? I don't think we have anything.
Someone asked about ammo.
Okay, but I'll get to that in a second, since it looks like we actually will have time. My preparations paid off, and by having all the partials, I was able to get through this. But so I think I've got everything. Just make sure that you have a loop at one end. The important things are loop at one end, keep it on your hand, keep it from flying away. A knot at the other end that you can release and let it fly without throwing your sling. You only want to throw the ammo. Just like with the atlatl, you want to throw the dart, not the atlatl itself. Not going into any of the different styles. I will say that Ethelmark, if you're going to go up there to throw or down there to throw, depending on where you're coming from, they do have a maximum length on the sling. I believe it's either 20 or 24 inches. That being the folded length. So the whole thing overall would be about 4 feet. If you, for whatever reason, feel you want something, need something longer, if you're in Ethelmark, you have to get special permission from the Kingdom Marshal in order to do that. I'm not sure if that was to prevent too many people from hitting the ground when they're swinging. One thing that all the kingdoms, those who have approved and those who have not approved, have agreed on is no helicopters. Nobody wants to clear that much space around their range so that would be needed in case of an errant throw. So everything is going to have to be somewhat in the vertical domain on your throw. Had a question on some of the ammo. The ammo has to be soft. That has not been well defined yet. There have been some discussions. As Anya mentioned, she uses hacky sacks. Hacky sacks work beautifully. My concern initially with those was, would they hold up to the beatings against targets? And everybody who's used them has had no problems. I do have one friend who uses these little foam footballs. They're nice, but they are extremely light. Some people take these and cover them duct tape to make them look like metal, and also give them a little bit of extra weight. Somebody suggested using these little water balls, which would be kind of nice. You dunk them in water, it gives them some weight, and they will splat against your target. But they'll also get everybody else around you wet. But they have some nice weight. Some people take a hunk of leather like this, sew it into whatever shape they want, and fill it with more scrap leather. Master Chris decided to do some experimenting. He took some cornhole ammo and cut them open and divided them up by weight, so that you've got, and put them into little canvas bags, as it were. And we have 1 ounce ones, 2 ounce, 3 ounce, 6 ounce, 8 ounce, and somewhere in here I've got a 4 ounce. The 6 and the 8 definitely get too bulky to really use, but this way we were able to try and determine what we could do. I tend to go between the 2 and the 3 ounce ones. They're large enough to stay in my pocket and have enough oomph on them to fly well, and they're not too bulky. But there's a 4. All of these types of things can work. If you want to practice with real stones, as long as you're not on an SCA range, go ahead, at least give you practice with technique. But on the SCA ranges, it does have to be soft ammo. Nobody I know of has come up with a standard target of any sort. There are professional leagues that use a gong. Baroness Anastasi has created a skee ball-like device of 3 concentric circles with nets behind them, so you know which one you went into. Otherwise, it's hard to tell without having a hoop or a sound-making device. It's hard to tell where you're hitting because they bounce off. Mungo, you have a question, or Sarah?
Has anybody, this is purely theoretical, but has anyone considered using this in combat? Like throwing tennis balls at knights?
They used to allow hand throwing of tennis balls, but those becomes dangerous because you've got the small rolly pieces of ammo on the field, and it becomes a tripping hazard and a stepping and ankle twisting hazard. So as far as I know, for the most part, throwing rocks has not been allowed. At least I haven't seen anybody use throwing rocks in 20 years or so. And it would have to probably then, at that point, it would then fall under combat archery, because combat archery covers all missile weapons, no matter whether it's with heavy or with rapier. So it covers the rubber band guns and arrows and anything else that anybody might want to consider throwing. There are people who've made throwing knives and things like that for combat, and that all falls under combat archery's realm.
Thank you.
So back to Anya's earlier question about targets for the Plumbatas. Generally, as I said, they work well with your typical soft targets, whether that's made from foam, from the foam floor pieces, and the ones that you get for your, yeah. We'll leave that out there, Adel, for now.
It's combat archery plumbata.
I know, but you get the foam floor pieces that are used for garages or craft rooms and things like that, that's interlock. You put a few of those together, tape them up. They work great for spears. They work great for plumbatas. The plumbatas work well in hay bales. If your tips are sharp enough, they work fine in hard targets, but they also work very well with ground targets. Another thing that Master Chris and I have been trying to push in the community is trying to standardize a Plumbata royal round. And for that, we looked at the ratio of the sizes of the circles for the current royal rounds, the 3, 7, or 3, 8, 14-inch circles that are used for the axe, knife, and spear right now. And he enlarged that to make, using 4 of those interlocking floor pieces. Don't have it inside, I've got that outside in the garage. So you've got this 4x4 piece of foam with the circles painted on it in 3 colors with the same ratio, 7.5, 20, 36, I believe, is what it comes out, or 24, 36, something like that. And whether you throw overhand or underhand, launching into those works really well too. Looked at distances instead of the 10-foot and 20-foot at being 30 feet and 50 feet. So you'd put them about 20 feet behind your targets, and then you only need your 10 and your 30-foot line, and you launch into them. So far, they've worked out well. We've had some fun playing with them. We've brought them to a couple of events. And let's see, Anya had one of our marshals did water balloons as ammo. Yeah, picking up water balloon bits is yeah, about as bad as glow sticks. But the other problem with water balloons that I can see is, depending on the brand of your water balloons, some of the things that are made for water balloons, so they're made to break easily, when you're spinning, they may break on you before you get a chance to release them. So if you want to give yourself a shower, go for it. If you use ones that are, you know, heavy balloons, then they may not break, and then they'll throw them right back at you. Construction, Adolf, what's with the construction flags?
Remember at a Ruby Joust when I did the circle for the plumbatas in the back, the spear clout and the
Oh,
plumbatas?
right. Yeah, construction flags. It's just having something solid gives you, you know, flags give you your distance, but having a painted circle of some sort. We tested all sorts of different sorts of materials, from muslin and sheets and things like that, and the foam just worked out the best, and we had a lot of it because spear targets and archery targets. Before you do the slings, check in with Master Chris, because he needs to know that you're going to be doing slings experimentally at Ymir, and he will want that, any results in your write-up when you do your event report. So if you're going to use slings at Ymir, make sure he knows. See,
You've got
What up,
about 5 minutes.
okay, and am I caught up on all of the questions? I think that's all the questions. I will finalize a little bit on the list that I made of materials and some of the concerns, which things have better advantages or disadvantages due to wind or due to weight. And I will put them out on the Atlantean Thrown Weapons page. I also will be able to mail it. It's just a simple text file. Since I have access to everybody's email who signed up for the class, I can send it to everybody and can get it that way too. as Lissa mentioned, we have about 5 minutes left. Did I cover everything? Is there anybody who's got any concerns or questions? Lisbeth, are you trying to say something or just talking to your other half? Because you're on mute.
Struggling with the mute button, sorry. Could you please remind us about how long it is from loop to pocket and to the other end?
Like I said, one person I know recommended fingertip to elbow, being from fingertip to elbow, the loop being at your fingertip, not being on your finger elbow. I tend to like them about another 2 inches or so longer than that for mine. But again, this is going to be something you're going to have to experiment with. If you get too long, you can't use it in ethyl mark, but anyway, you can, but you have to get special permission. But I can only see really taller people wanting something much more than that. 24 inches is a really long one. I made one that I really decided it was too long, and it's probably about 30 inches long. And it really is too long to use. But it looked nice. It looks pretty. It's got a nice balanced cup. Unlike my first attempt, which was really ugly. But one of the differences being, there you go. Now, these two were both made with the same type of twine. This one being 3 strands doubled over, this one being 6 strands doubled over. And you can see the difference in the width that you get from it. That comes down to a personal preference. How strong do you want your cup to be? I kind of like the thickness of the 12-strand cup, but I like the 3-strand for the main part of it. There are ways of playing around. String is fun to play with. And like I said, you can sit there and make these while sitting in court. Bring yourself some clips and just start braiding while you're listening to what's going on in court. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question for you.
Yes, Mungo.
On throwing plumbatas at an event,
Yes.
is there any number that has been determined that you can throw on a turn? Like 3 or 6 or something like that?
Not really, just like knives or whatever, depending on how many people you have on the range. If you've got people who are throwing very slowly, then you can allow a few more plumbatas. If they're taking time with their axes. If people are really quick, then you cut back on the number that you're going to allow.
Okay, thank you.
As Adolf said, Marshall's choice. I tend to carry my bucket of plumbatas with me because I just toss a bunch. It draws attention. People like it, and when you go and pick them up, you can just put them back in the bucket and carry them back rather than trying to carry them back as a handful. If you've ever been on an archery range, yes, you have, Mungo, and you've shot off your 6 arrows and you're waiting for that crossbowman to complete. Or the new archer who takes time doing it. Sometimes if the target will allow it, you take a couple extra shots. Otherwise, you limit yourself to the 6 and wait for the slower weaponry to complete. I hope everybody liked this, and I think it worked out well. Had number of people. There was one person I know who was signed up for it, who I did not see showing up at any time. I'll have to get together with Rose Eileen. I know she had some questions about it.
I wanted to just add, so I'm in North Shield now. I started in Atlantia, and I ran the range at our largest Kingdom summer event and made sure to include a lane for Plumbata, and it was hands down the easiest accessible for newcomers to come in, because it's not sharp people could come in and they could just, they got it right away. There wasn't a technique to it. It always was gonna stick in the ground. Like, obviously there's a technique to getting better at it, but it wasn't like a knife or an axe where you're gonna completely miss the target. So it was a really great recruitment activity for us in North Shield. So just to keep that in mind.
At down in Caremare at their St. Sebastian event this past weekend or week and a half ago. We had a bunch of people coming out to thrown weapons. And as soon as we pulled out the Plumbatas, though, we got a whole bunch more. I think the only person, I don't think the king ever came out and tried the Plumbatas, but he may have. I know we couldn't get the queen to try, but they're big on thrown weapons, so it's been nice for this rain, except that it was a winter rain, so we couldn't get them out there too much. So I guess that's it. People have other classes to go to. And I guess we'll have to call it a day. I'll get the sheet mailed out to everybody and posted. And thank you for coming.